Today is the day I'm gonna rank every sport on their ability to pull girls. And make no mistake, this list will upset you. First up, we got wrestling. Immediately, I'm gonna make a lot of people mad, but screw it. If your sport essentially boils down to two buff men wearing extremely tight clothing rubbing up against each other for 10 minutes, don't expect to pull a lot of girls. Wrestling is by far the gayest sport. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but let's be honest here. The funniest thing is, fake wrestling pulls more than real wrestling. Like, you hear stories of Ric Flair back in the day, man was legit living like a rock star. I can already hear the wrestlers in the comments typing away, eviscerating my existence, but listen, I actually respect wrestling a lot as a sport. Alexander Karelin, Yoel Romero, I mean, you guys got some great athletes in your history. But a spandex one piece is not exactly a chick magnet, which is why wrestling is an F tier when it comes to pulling girls. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is an F for the same reason. Now, I'm gonna be honest, Charles Oliveira makes BJJ look super cool, but still, you ain't getting no girls rolling around with sweaty men on mats. Next up, we got swimming. Now, in my last video, I rated swimming a D, but the more I think about it, that's too harsh. Swimming has gotta be the most aesthetic sport. It turns out doing intense cardio in water for 8 hours a day makes you extremely shredded. But it's really hard to rate swimming though, because there's not a lot of mainstream interest in it. But every guy I know who swims definitely pulls. Whether there's a correlation between the two, I'm not sure. Maybe it's too high, but I'm gonna rank swimming a B. If you're a decent swimmer, you're probably gonna be able to pull, even if it's just based on your physique. Now let's talk about the least aesthetic sport, cross country or long distance running. If swimming is the good kind of shredded, then cross country is the bad kind of shredded. You see, swimming activates a lot of upper body muscles, which is why swimmers tend to have developed arms, backs, and cores. But when it comes to distance running, if you want to be good, you have to be a stick from head to toe. Plus, cross country has got to be the most boring sport to watch. I mean, what girl is gonna pull up to watch you run 5 miles at a reasonable pace? You don't even have the benefit of track meets like track athletes where you're able to socialize with the female athletes between events. Like, track meets are basically just social events. Cross country meets though, you just pull up, run, and then leave. Honestly, if long distance running is something that appeals to you, you're probably a bit odd anyways. I hate to do it, but we gotta go F- for cross country. Now let's talk about mixed martial arts. Now, a sport where facial reconstructive surgery and brain damage is essentially guaranteed tends to not attract the smartest or most attractive individuals. But MMA is an interesting sport to rank when it comes to pulling, because if you're a champ, then it's an easy S. Like, there might need to be a ranking above S to describe how much UFC champs pull. But the average fighter is not pulling anywhere near that. Like, your average CTE case at your local MMA gym is like a D or F tier. Women love men who can fight. We all know this, but the unfortunate truth is they only love the winner. If you knock someone out in front of the girls, you're pulling for sure after the fight. But if you get knocked out, that's gonna be a really quiet, lonely car ride home. So I think we need to balance this interesting dichotomy out into the C tier. Now let's switch it up and be positive for a change and talk about pool or billiards. Now, I don't know if pool is considered a sport, but I don't really care, because if you're good at pool, you can pretty much pull any girl you want. I was previously unaware of this phenomenon, but at my college they have rec lounges with pool tables, and you will straight up see dudes playing intense games of pool with like 10 girls watching. And it's winner take all, if you know what I'm saying. It's like the human equivalent of two male elk butting heads and fighting for the female elk. Listen, I have no clue what it is about pool that makes girls wet. Maybe it's the stick and balls, but it's gotta be an easy A tier. Let's talk boxing. I love boxing. It's probably my favorite sport. I mean, one of my most popular videos is a recap of one of my favorite boxing fights. But let's be honest, boxing is hooked up to 5 ventilators, and we're getting ready to pull the plug at any moment. When the biggest boxing fight of the year is Jake Paul fighting a 58-year-old Mike Tyson, you know the sport's in trouble. And when it comes to the legit boxers, we got Ryan Garcia going on drunken rants saying the no-no word, Gervonta Tank Davis fighting once a year for the check, Canelo Alvarez doing his best but ultimately failing to keep the sport alive, and heavyweight boxing in complete shambles. I say say all of this to make the point that nobody cares about boxing anymore, least of all women. But back in the 80s and 90s, different story. Mike Tyson, Oscar De La Hoya, and even more recently guys like Floyd Mayweather were known to pull. But boxing has a similar effect to MMA where if you win, women love you, but if you lose, you're on your own. Except, unlike MMA, nobody under the age of 40 cares about boxing. I mean, look at the age demographic breakdown of my boxing video. You show a girl a picture of Terrence Crawford and she's probably gonna think that's Kendrick Lamar. D tier. We got cricket up next. Now, most of my viewer base is in America, so you probably don't know anything about cricket, so let me educate you. Not every country plays cricket, but in the ones that do, if you're good at it, you have generational levels of pull. Australia, South Africa, West Indies, New Zealand, if you're good at cricket in any of these countries, it's like the equivalent of basketball in the US or like soccer in Brazil. Score a century in front of the baddies and you're gonna have a phone book full of tens. And don't even get me started on cricket in India. I don't think any country is as obsessed with a sport like India is with cricket. Bro, Kohli has 300 million followers on Instagram. That's more than Neymar. If you're good at cricket in India, you might as well be a royal family member. Just maybe stop choking in the finals every World Cup. So cricket is an interesting sport to rank because we're going on a worldwide scale. In the places that don't play cricket, it's like an F, but in the places that do, it's an easy S. So I think I'm gonna go B tier for cricket. ASMR. Bodybuilding. Now, you'd think a sport where the sole goal of the competition was aesthetics would be able to pull all the girls they want, but there's a fatal flaw in this model. Let's just look at bodybuilding objectively. Buff men get oiled up and flex on stage in front of other men who will judge them on their poses and muscles. The entire concept is not tailored towards the female gaze or even the male gaze, but the gym bro gaze. And let me tell you, the gym bro gaze is extremely messed up. Every gym bro thinks he's too small. Literally every single one. Even if they're 6'5", 250 pounds, they still want to be bigger. So to appeal to this demographic of people, if you want to be an elite bodybuilder, you have to push way past the limits of human anatomy. Because of this, bodybuilders essentially look like human-shaped habanero peppers. Like, women are obviously attracted to muscular guys, but this is just way too far. I remember Chris Bumstead was talking about the gender ratio of his follower base and how it was like 96% male. Now, C-Bum could obviously pull any girl he wanted, but that's more so because of his clout and the fact that he's one of the greatest to ever do it. Your average bodybuilder is not going to be pulling anywhere near that, and because of that, bodybuilding has got to be a D tier. Skateboarding is up next. Now, I've never ridden a skateboard in my life, and I can only name like 2 professional skateboarders, but I definitely respect it as a sport. And what I do know is skateboarders got game. The thing is, skateboarders pull a very specific demographic of girls. While basketball or football players attract a wide net of women, a specific sect of them go for skateboarders. You know exactly what I'm talking about. These girls love Nirvana, wearing baggy clothing. They probably started smoking cigarettes when they were like 15. And also they probably relate to Ramona Flowers on a concerning level. Now, these girls are also usually pretty hot, but they're also walking red flags, so pursue them at your own risk. But if you're a skater and you're halfway decent, that's all you, bro. I think because of this interesting phenomenon within culture, skateboarding has got to be a strong B tier to a light A tier. Now let's talk about figure skating. Now, in my last video, I rated figure skating a B tier with no explanation, which ruffled a few feathers. So let me explain myself. Is figure skating one of the gayer sports out there? Yes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you have to also understand that a lot of these figure skating events are dances between men and women. Now, you may think this is more of like a friend dynamic, but I think it's way too sensual to just be friends. If you're constantly practicing your sensual ice skating moves with women all day, just out of proximity, you're gonna pull more girls. I mean, it just makes sense. Is B too high? Probably, but this list is official and it can't be changed. Esports. Now, you may be thinking that's not a sport, but I mean, it's in the name. Like it or not, this is what peak male performance looks like. Also, I love these names. Faker, Ruler, Deft, The Shy. Esports apparently has a larger viewership than baseball, basketball, and hockey. Who knew there were so many nerds? I mean, how do you have 84 million people watching your sport and 84 million of them are basement dwellers? Z tier. Fight me, bro. Chess? What? Who snuck this one in here? S tier. That's the list. It is official and it is final. If you're wondering why this list missed a lot of major sports, it's because I talked about them in my first video on this topic. It'll be the first link in the description if you want to find out the rankings for football, basketball, golf, soccer, and more. Also, follow me on Instagram. That's where I'll post pictures, updates, and communicate with you guys directly. I'm posting there once we hit 10,000 subscribers, so check it out.